Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. This is Eisenherz back from a little bit of a longer break. Unfortunately, due to some drastic and rather sad situations in my personal life, I was not able to produce any content or even play Magic for some time, but I slowly feel like I have the time, energy and focus again to get back into it. So without further ado, let's talk about what happens when there are two Consecrated Sphinxes in play. I've seen this situation pretty often because Sphinx is such a prime target for any clone, but I've also seen people play it out wrong quite often as well. So let's start by reading Sphinx again. Consecrated Sphinx is a 6 mana 4/6 Sphinx with flying that says whenever an opponent draws a card, you may draw 2 cards. This is an incredibly strong ability because it basically reverses the card advantage produced by an opponent's heuristic study. With Sphinx in play, your opponents can basically never gain card advantage over you, and if Sphinx sticks for just one turn cycle, it will draw at least 6 and usually even more cards. Just absurdly strong, but also pretty expensive, not all that resilient, and of course a prime target for clones. But what exactly happens when there are two Sphinxes in play? Well, the short answer is they trigger each other until one player stops drawing cards. The long answer is a bit more complex, because we need to take a closer look at the triggers and how they stack. So let's get into the details. If player 1 and player 2 control a Sphinx, and player 3 draws a card for turn, 2 triggers are placed on the stack in ap-nap order. So player 1's Sphinx trigger goes on the stack, and on top of that we will have player 2's Sphinx trigger. If player 2 decides to take that trigger, they will draw 2 cards. Then 2 more Sphinx triggers will be placed on the stack for player 1, because player 2 just drew 2 cards. Now the highest Sphinx trigger for player 1 will resolve. They draw 2 cards. Before their next trigger resolves, 2 more triggers are placed on the stack for player 2, because player 1 just drew 2 cards. Now the highest Sphinx trigger for player 2 will resolve. They draw 2 cards, and again, before their next trigger resolves, 2 more triggers are placed on the stack for player 1, because player 2 just drew 2 cards. This cycle of getting 2 triggers, resolving 1 trigger to draw 2 cards, and then having the other player get 2 triggers, resolving 1 trigger to draw 2 cards, and so on, simply continues until one player thinks their hand is good enough to simply stop or to react to the triggers. Now, if they stop, there will still be triggers on the stack for both players. To work down the stack, either player has to agree to stop taking the triggers. Otherwise, the loop will simply continue, or one player will keep drawing cards while the other declines. Okay, so far so good, right? But 2 questions arise. The first is, how can we shortcut and organize this without making any game rule violations? And the second question is, when do I actually stop drawing cards? So to answer the first question, you simply shortcut this whole Double Sphinx situation by doing the following. One after the other, each player will put a Sphinx trigger on the stack and draw 2 cards. You can use tokens and dice to symbolize how many Sphinx triggers are on the stack. Then simply continue to do this alternately until one of you decides to either stop drawing cards or to react to one of the triggers. This will allow you to properly work up the stack and also work down the stack without making any game rule violations, missing any triggers or wasting too much time. Of course, this can get more complicated with Triple Sphinx, Orcish Bowmasters or Smothering Tithe, but that is a general cEDH problem that I'm not able to solve. To answer the second question though, I can only give you my personal gameplay advice that allowed me to never lose in a Double Sphinx situation. First of all, don't let the game devolve into a situation where the 2 Sphinx players just draw their decks and battle it out with 70 cards in hand each. This leads to very weird gameplay dynamics because the game turns into a 1v1 and can also cause undesirable king-making scenarios. Now, of course, every situation is different and you'll need to properly assess the board state, threat level of your opponents and cards in your hand, but ideally you just draw enough cards until you find a way to remove your opponent's Consecrated Sphinx. With the remaining triggers still on the stack, you will then draw a ton of cards without additionally feeding your opponents through their Sphinx. This card advantage should then allow you to disrupt your opponents enough to stop them from winning and also present a protected win, or at the very least generate an almost unbeatable advantage over your opponents. Honestly though, after drawing 20 to 30 cards, there should be no way of you not winning. The only opponent you'll really need to be focusing on is the player that also drew cards off their Sphinx. But again, if you do it right, you'll have way more cards available to you than they will have. So the goal here is not to have your opponent draw their deck, just so that you can also draw your deck, because this is not card advantage. The goal is to draw as many cards as necessary to stop your opponents from drawing more cards by removing their Sphinx, in order to then generate an absurd card advantage over them that will lead you to a win. And that's it for today. I really hope you could learn something. If so, make sure to like, share, comment and subscribe. I'm really happy to be back. This is Eisenherz and Auf Wiedersehen.